Persian Vikings that became problematic when they mixed up with a cult. Now you see why I said that. So hello my Gunrunners, welcome back to AYYKAYY Reacts. I'm AK, an interpreter and freelancer from Iran, and for this week we have a very special video requested by one of the channel members. I have never seen anything from this channel, Invicta, but I am very excited about this one. The Daylamites have an extremely complex history in, well, the history of Iran since technically the ancient times. Of course, there's a lot I'm gonna talk about, but first I want to see what this video talks, and whenever I can I will chip in for more information while trying to keep the longer ones or ones needing more context for the afterthought section of the video. The video title is The Daylamites, the East's Answer to the Legionary Documentary. Before we start, make sure to go over to Invicta's channel, like the video, share, comment, all that. Let the algorithm do its thing. You can see all the links down in the description or in the top right corner right about now. And hey, if you like my commentary, don't forget to like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get started and start.
The realms of the ancient Near East have long been esteemed as the land of the horse. Indeed, many great empires have arisen on the saddles of an elite cavalry force.
Almost a requirement,
their infantry
yeah.
seldom receive praise and are often looked down upon as weak chaff troops. Yet,
There's where the
scattered across
Daylamite come
eastern
in.
territories were many mountain tribes who boasted a heritage of close combat. Among the greatest of these were the warriors of Daylam, who arose under the Sasanians, not only as fearsome heavy infantry mercenaries and core battlefield units, but also as the elite guard of great kings.
Yeah, that is true.
Today, we shall review their origins, their equipment,
Viking
training,
style, very harsh,
tactics, and service history. This is the story
throughout all of
the
Iran.
Daylamite warriors.
Alright, I'm actually very interested now.
You can lead your own elite forces into epic battles with today's sponsor, World of Warships Legends. It's
Ethical
a massive
Reacts,
multiplayer naval
we watch
combat
the
game, which
sponsorship,
requires
so
both strategic
make sure to
thinking
support the
and
creator of this
reflex to
channel
rule the
in any
waves.
way you can.
PvP battles range from massive 9v9 duels to wild 4-way free-for-alls, where you'll want to carefully scout your enemy, strategically target weak points, and finally close in for the kill. With console play, you can enjoy this glorious action on the big screen. Naval gameplay is given great depth by fleets composed of 4 main ship classes: the swift-moving destroyers, the well-rounded cruisers, the fortress battleships, and the versatile aircraft carriers. The game already boasts over 400 ships, 100 commanders, 10 nations, and more than 20 maps. But on top of this, you get regular fleet expansions, new ships, and fresh missions. It's easy to get into, with endless opportunities to explore and compete against millions of players. World of Warships Legends is actually celebrating its 5th anniversary with ancient Greece-style festivities. These include the Treasure Hunt web event, the new crafting station, and the Aegean Arrow campaign, which yields new unique rewards like the Divine Commander Guises. Exciting new features are also rolling out, like the US Hybrid Battleship line and the First Fleet's Cup Tournament. So get started today by clicking the link in the description below and enjoy a welcome package using our code for these awesome rewards. Enjoy.
Alright, let's start.
The lands of Iran consist largely of a vast highland plateau bordered by great mountain belts. These regions are famed for the horsemen who came to master their open steppes. And yet not all followed in their tracks. This was especially true of the tribes which took shelter in the various mountain ranges, which proved far less
that is true.
to such mounted traditions. Such peoples thus evolved their own forms of warfare.
Especially those within the jungles.
Would be the inhabitants of northern Iran, a highland
Caucasus,
region between the southern Caspian Sea and
around
the
the Caspian
mountain range.
The
It is a
northern
land
one,
of topographic extremes, with the terrain rising abruptly from sea level to a max of 5,600 meters within just 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
The towering Alborz thus serves as a giant wall which catches moisture from the Caspian Sea, resulting in wet northern slopes filled with streams, marshes, tributary valleys, and lush Hyrcanian forests. Here one could once find many tigers, bears, wolves, boars, deer, and all manner of other creatures.
The wildlife there is absolutely huge.
Archaeology reveals a long history of human presence in the region dating back to the Lower Paleolithic. The
Daylamites usually are
were a hardy folk who initially
pre-Iranian, at least believed to be,
cattle herding, before eventually developing into a series of martial tribes. Each group was ruled by chiefs or local kings.
They had their own systems, social hierarchies.
As a result of their isolation from the
some parts even matriarchal
regions, such mountain folk were seen by outsiders as wild barbarians. And yet the two would soon find themselves entwined. For instance, when the Median Empire arose around the 8th century BC, it would reportedly clash with the peoples of the southern Caspian. Unfortunately,
no
details remain of this exchange. The conflict was likely hard fought owing to the defensible nature of the terrain, and outright conquest of the more remote tribes is doubtful.
God, the imagery is actually
some sort of
beautiful.
Vassalage or tributary system was established. When the later Achaemenid Empire arose in the 6th century
the founding
BC,
fathers
it
of
was Cyrus
Persia
the Great who conquered and divided this region into several administrative provinces. In the event that wars arose, the King of Kings would draw from its
Shahanshah,
warriors. For instance, the Hyrcanians are listed by Herodotus as part of King Xerxes' invasion force during the Second Greco-Persian War, and by Arrian in King Darius's army at Gaugamela during the conquests of Alexander the Great. Over the following centuries, the region along the southern Caspian would trade hands as various empires came and went. Most were
they got diluted,
and their control of the tribes tenuous.
Rose back up, got diluted again.
Even when the Parthians managed to establish a more long-lived empire starting in the 3rd century BC, they failed to fully leverage the power of the mountain tribes due to their focus on maintaining largely mounted forces.
Some of the mountain tribes were never even conquered fully by Persia.
Would change in the
they had some
AD
level of autonomous
Sassanid Empire
rule per se.
Whilst still maintaining a staple of
Sassanids were
units,
pretty
they
cordial
leaned
with
more
them
heavily
actually.
upon the
They
hybrid
hired
cultures
them.
within their domain to deploy a mixed arms approach to warfare. Just as the Romans of the East were slowly learning to add more cavalry to the mix, so too were the Sassanids adding more heavy infantry. Thus, in their search for an elite infantry corps, they came upon the yet untapped power of the Daylamites.
Daylamites and Gilaks, better to say.
Of the modern Iranian province of Gilan. Owing to its comparatively infertile lands and rough terrain, many here were forced to eke out a living through hard labor as woodsmen and fishermen. Even their leaders were said to share in these trials.
Okay, there are some really good imagery that it does, like the armor and the clothing is actually pretty good. They were known to use, well, I would make the similarity that these are very similar to Vikings because they technically are during this era, at least, during the Sassanids, and before they were all pagan in the mountains. Lots of their social hierarchies were more inclusive towards women, as they would leave them in charge, had at least some sort of responsibility in their social caste system. But the lands were not infertile, that is one for sure. They were known for being very agricultural. They were one of the bigger traders of silk, very good handicraft from wood or potteries. And in agriculturals, they were technically known to be rice farmers, and one of the few where men and women were working the field in a more communal way, which is a tradition still in use today in current day Iran. So, you know, kind of fun fact. Also, there are multiple names that have been used to refer to these people. For example, after Islam, they were mostly known as the Tabaristan kingdom. But Tabaristan itself was like made from like 4 or 5 different groups groups of people, very close ethnically and linguistically, one of which was Daylamites or Daylamian. The other would be Gilaks or people of Gilan. These two kind of merged the further in history we go. In today's Iran, they're known as Gilak. The Daylamites and Gilaks kind of merged. It's a very convoluted history, but they're technically now the same people. Out of the 5 big families that made Tabaristan, which is like a state in north of Iran, in current day at least, the 3 others would be Babr, Talish, and Moghan. All of these were kind of around the Caucasus, most of which are known to be pre-Iranian, before even the concept of country of Iran was made shape, which as you saw was during the Achaemenids era, the one I refer to as the founding father. They are technically like the Vikings of Iran, the Persian Vikings. They were pagan until they kinda became Muslim during the Tabaristan era. Before that, they were sun worshippers, they had idols, totems. Their totem is a very also Persian idol per se. It's a winged cow. They were mountainous, they fought with like javelins, no horses, used to wield battle axes, were mostly categorized as kind of like bold and very isolationists. They did well with people like the 4 other great families that they were involved in, as they kind of counted them as themselves, like the same people, but with outsiders, not really. They would usually be treated as guns for hire till they actually made their own state. If I were to give them a tagline, they are the battle axe wielding Vikings who became problematic when they got mixed in with a cult. Well, it's not right to call it a cult, but they did kill people for their religion. I don't know what else to call it. I don't know, I might get into it later. Let's keep going.
Apparently, a Persian envoy was once shocked to have found a high chieftain working barefoot in the rice fields, wearing patched trousers and a ragged tunic.
Yeah, that is a weird thing to see, I would say.
Made the Daylamites tough, determined, and enterprising. Scarcity at home in turn left them eager to seek fortunes abroad by loaning out their skills as mercenaries.
Yeah, guns for hire.
They made excellent raw material for soldiers. Once embraced by the Sasanids and later caliphates, the Daylamites would be forged into a formidable professional force capable of standing toe-to-toe with even the Romans in close quarters. So what did these soldiers look like?
Let's see.
Initially, they came to battle as lightly equipped infantry. However, over time, their standards would gradually be raised in proportion to their esteem, eventually boasting gear and regalia similar to that of prestige cavalry units.
They were first throwing javelins,
It should be noted that the Daylamites were in service for many centuries, and thus any specific depiction would not hold true in all cases. With that being said, we can present an indicative snapshot of how they may have looked in the peak Sassanid period. As a base, they wore boots, trousers, and likely a shirt or padded vest. Over this was worn lamella armor or chainmail hauberks.
Chainmails, yeah.
These were secured by decorated belts and probably chest bands, seen more commonly among elite cavalry. Heads, meanwhile, were protected by Spangenhelm-style helmets, possibly with accompanying face and neck armor, in addition to decorative Sasanian ribbons.
Truly a heavy armor
Finally,
for a heavy
large
infantryman.
oval or round shields with bright colors and distinctive decorations, as depicted.
Yeah, they also had like very good tactics during like shield walls
gear was further adorned with gold ornaments and other
against other cavalry or infantrymen.
In terms of offense, they seem to have used a wide arsenal of weapons. One of these was the Zupin short spear, which was said to have a blade on both ends. These could be used both as javelins to hurl at the enemy or to stab in close quarters.
Yeah, give them more range.
Known to have carried the tabazin, the traditional battle axe of Persia. Its head sported one or two crescent-shaped blades, which was affixed atop a thin metal handle. Typically, these were 3 feet long, but variants are known to exist up to 7 feet tall.
Heavy axes,
were also quite common and seem to have leveraged the lappet suspension system of their mounted peers. At range, these warriors may also
more
have used
variations
bows
in
or
sword,
slings.
as shamshirs were there.
Thus, they stood as formidably equipped warriors. This was especially true of the most elite Daylamite units,
Yeah,
which
the
came to
elite
serve
guards.
as the bodyguards of kings, known as the Gondi Shohanshaw. Such men wore some of the best gear of their era, leveraging the skilled metal workers of the Sassanid Empire, which rivaled the best foundries of India and China.
Exactly.
According to Dr. Manucher Kosani, it's possible that they even bore some of the earliest forms of Damascus steel, known as Shapuragan. But how were the Daylamites organized and trained? As with their gear, this would have varied greatly over time. We can begin with organization. Generally speaking,
Alright,
it seems
let's
that they
see.
began as a fierce but unruly and ill-disciplined warband. Yet, as they joined the Sassanid armed forces, or Ispa, and were exposed to the methods of large-scale warfare and pitched battle, their ways began to change.
Savaron is cavalry,
The
yeah.
exact methods by which this occurred are not well understood. Researchers believe that the infantry wing of the army was commanded by a pagan salar, who was ranked second beneath the Framadar Savaran, in charge of the cavalry.
Pagan Salar, yeah.
The infantry itself was then subdivided into several classifications, including the heavy troops of the Pagan, the light troops of the Nezer Daran, and the foot archers. It seems that the
Okay, just to translate some of the words at least here. Salar kind of means commander, Pai means foot, Pagan kind of refers to the foot soldiers, as you would see here in the heavy troops. Neze Daran, Daran means having, Neze means spear, so spearmen. Usually light troops would be used to take care of cavalry, using their speed and, of course, equipment. Foot archers, kamangir, kamandaran, of course a requirement for every single one of them. And it would be pretty easy for them to incorporate these armies into their own ranks, even if they came from ethnic groups or something. Specifically because the system of hiring soldiers or levies, training them and paying them from tax money is a system set by Achaemenids, the first empire, the founder empire, a system which is being used even today. So they always had these soldiers on hand, always training, and new soldiers coming in would see them mostly going through rigorous training just to at least be familiar with the basic tactics before they had any chance to go up the ladder. Of course, their equipment could be more than just javelins for throwing, as the closer you were to the king, as like the bodyguards that were mentioned, you would have access to royal armories, more money and more equipment. Also at this time, even the cavalry of Persia was technically very scary. The term Parthian shot is a idiom for a reason. I want to let them talk more to see where he ends up before I start ranting on my own. Let's keep going.
were part of and eventually displaced the traditional heavy troops of the Pagan upon their rise around the 6th century AD. Within their ranks, there would have been various tiers of organizing the men, though these details go unrecorded.
Sadly, yes.
Here, they served as professional infantrymen who would have been well trained and drilled. Unfortunately, we know little of their practices.
Yes, they would be
However,
employed
our sources
year-round.
indicate that they were held in high esteem and may have even been registered in state rolls and paid in cash in a similar manner to elite cavalry.
Some
If
were
they also
actually
shared in the same
stated as
rigors of cavalry
officers.
training, then it certainly would have been robust. This likely included tenets of the ancient Iranian martial arts and traditions such as the famed
Zurkhane, yeah.
These emphasize strength, discipline, courage, and moral conduct.
Zurkhane also means
Training
house of
may have
power.
involved the familiar
It means a
activities of
gym,
wrestling,
technically.
running, push-ups, and even ancient weightlifting.
Yes. Also, that
When these
I have to
Daylamites
pause
came
this,
together,
sorry. Also, as P just mentioned, the Zurkhane, that is like the most ancient type of gym that we have. And it isn't a gym for just making powerful, just making your body powerful or beautiful like bodybuilding is. It was literally a athletic version of just making yourself good for battle. That is it. They would usually train you with stuff that would mimic maces, bows, shields, and swords. also had this moral code that is not too unsimilar to the Bushido way, you know, the warrior spirit. There's a code of conduct. That thing has its own like entire hour of debate just by itself. Zurkhane even has its own social hierarchy class. It has a caste system on who gets to wear the most beautiful pants. Not lying, that's how you know which level you belong to. And it does have some communal way of making camaraderie, not unlike like training in basic training and any sort of military training per se. It would be a good way to incorporate some alien force coming into the army and to train them year round. Let's keep going.
Their unit level training revolved around forming a tight phalanx, which would present a shield
walls, yeah.
In battle, they took up position in the traditional location of the pagan, which some scholars believe consisted of both light and heavy subgroups. In the early years,
yeah, the foot
this may have meant
soldiers,
standing
kind
just
of the name
behind
says.
the archer line as a force which could protect its lighter brethren and be prepared to close the distance once the enemy lines had been sufficiently weakened. In later years, however, the pagan evolved into a more distinctly heavy infantry force, which formed the solid core of the Sassanids' new three-part battle formation.
Tactics changing, yeah.
They remained largely on the defensive as a bastion, around which the wings and vanguard forces could reform between attacks. However, the Daylamites could also find themselves deployed more dynamically. One favoured tactic of Sassanid commanders was to have the heavy troops paired closely behind advancing cavalry units. Here, the Savaran would threaten a charge, forcing the enemy to prepare to repel mounted troops. At this point, the screen of riders would peel off to the sides, revealing
allowing
a
the
charge
foot soldiers,
by heavy infantry. This sort of tactic was excellent at keeping the enemy off balance and, with the Sassanid
keeping on
advantage in
hitting them,
mobility,
yeah,
could be delivered across various vectors of the battlefield to devastating effect. Beyond this,
there is one thing that you should always know. Cavalries were OP as much as OP would be defined, but they also had their own glaring weaknesses, which were the cavalry's strength only was at its first charge. After that, they needed to go back, regroup, and ready to do another charge to break the stance of the enemy. You would need some sort of foot soldier to keep on the attack, to distract them, to keep them occupied per se, to take them out. Light cavalry or archer cavalries would not have that problem because they would be less charging than most or only doing it when they need to, but they also had the option to stay at sidelines and keep hitting the enemy, which this multifunction ability of those made them so overpowered alongside their speed. Let's keep going.
Also see such heavy infantry taking up a range of roles. This included accompanying the Sassanid Elephant Corps into battle as a support force, which would help prevent these living tanks from being surrounded and overwhelmed in the thick of combat.
That is almost the only thing that will take care of them.
Heavy infantry being used as shock troops or being tasked with special operations.
Taking down specific targets, yeah. The imagery is actually very good, by the way.
Proved highly proficient.
Mace warfare was a big thing.
Europos, as an example, we might expect such troops to help storm the walls or infiltrate them through subterranean passages. Such was the increasing prestige of the Daylamites that they even became elevated as elite bodyguards to the King of Kings.
Yes, there was once an entire army based off of them.
Let us now turn to a review of their service history.
Ooh.
As previously stated, we know that the Sassanids would be the first ones to fully integrate the Daylamites into their military.
Exactly, as a third-party mercenary group.
Gradual and most likely only began in earnest around 520 AD, when the eldest son of King Kavad I was appointed to rule their lands.
Kavad, yeah.
This timing would prove fortuitous, as shortly thereafter a 6-year war erupted between the Romans and Sassanids. Much of the fighting was concentrated around the border regions of northwestern Mesopotamia and Armenia.
Yeah, part known as Persian Armenia at the time.
Forces under a Daylamite general reportedly participated in the Iberian campaign, to re-establish control over this northern territory. Here, mountainous terrain and a chain of forts served as an excellent proving ground for the heavy infantrymen. The value of the Daylamites is made clear by their repeated deployment in the wars which would continue to erupt along this front over the years. For instance, during
they
the
were
reign
very
of
good at
Khusro
their
I,
job, yeah.
They saw action in the 20-year Lazic War, which once more saw them fighting against Romans in the passes and fortifications of the region. The Daylamite excellence even caught the attention of Procopius, who noted their contributions to the siege of Archaeopolis in 552 AD. Soon, their military prowess would see the scope of their campaigns grow even larger.
That is true, yeah.
In 570 AD, several hundred Daylamites were reportedly part of the Sassanid expeditionary force, which sailed around the Arabian Peninsula to land
for the Yemen one.
On paper, this was a mission meant to protect the Himyarites against the growing might of the Aksumite Empire.
Yeah.
However, the grander motive was to establish Sasanian influence over
these
distant lands and their important trade. Thus it was that Nauzad, son of King Khusro I, led the mission in person. However, he would be slain in the early fighting. Command now passed to Wariz, a Sasanian general of Daylamite origin. In vengeance for the slaying of his lord, he and the Daylamites confronted the Aksumites at the Battle of Hadramaut, defeated their army, killed their king, and besieged their city Sana'a. The end result was a crushing victory.
Oh yeah, the conquest of Yemen,
and
current
the
day at least.
Withdrew their expedition.
Mission done,
However,
let's go home,
the
yeah.
Aksumites would return 5 years later, once more overrunning the region. In response, another Sasanian expedition was launched. This time, Wariz and
Here
his
comes the
Daylamites
second one.
were supported by a force of 4,000 men who fought a campaign involving raids, sieges, and pitched battles. Ultimately, Wariz proved victorious, emerging with great riches and the new position as governor of Yemen. His followers and descendants would come to intermarry with the locals, planting the seeds of Daylamite influence in Arab lands. Meanwhile, ongoing wars with Emperor Justin II kept the Daylamites of northern Iran busy. Campaigns were once more undertaken against the Romans and their allies in the mountains
were always
of Caucasus
fighting Rome, it
and
doesn't
in
matter.
the fortified northern Mesopotamia. In such matters, we yet again hear authors such as Agathias characterize the Daylamites as skillful warriors in close combat. Thus, the Roman infantrymen
Oh,
were
from the
finally
western
forced
side,
to
huh?
come to terms with a battlefield peer. However, in 589 AD, the Sassanids would be rocked by a 2-year civil war.
Oh yeah.
Here, the Daylamites at first supported the rebellion of Bahram VI against Khusro II. However, this
But
decision was not
Khusro II
taken
makes
as a
a
black
deal
mark
with the
on their
Romans
record. To the
against
contrary,
Bahram and Shubin.
when Khusro II regained the throne, he would actually enlist the Daylamites as members of his personal guard. Around 600 AD, the king selected 4,000 of these elite soldiers from their home in Daylam and resettled them at Ctesiphon. It would be at the imperial capital where they would receive the
About
highest
current-day
levels of
Iraq's
equipment,
Baghdad
training, and honors. Chief among these would be the title of Gondi Shohanshaw, or Army of the King of Kings. Over the following decades, the Daylamites would serve their masters well. Yet they did so in a time of Sassanid decline. One of the greatest threats to emerge was the Arabs.
The start of the Muslim
In
conquest
630
of
AD,
Persia.
they had claimed control of Sassanid-aligned Yemen, and soon the Rashidun Caliphate was charging out of the peninsula to challenge the Sassanid Empire proper. The timing proved devastating. Recent wars with the Romans and chaotic civil wars had greatly exhausted the Eastern realm's military might.
Rome and
Thus,
Sassanid
in
empires,
636
yeah.
BC, when the Arab invaders marched up the Euphrates, the 12-year-old Sassanid king Yazdegerd III held sway over a greatly diminished territory and army. We should therefore consider with some skepticism the Arab claims of inflated troop counts at the decisive battle of Al-Qadisiyah.
Yeah, that is... it was a loss, but disputed how much.
A massive affair featuring at least around 40,000 soldiers. Here, the combatants faced off across the sprawling plains which flanked a crossing of the Atik River, a branch of the Euphrates. Among the Sassanid elephants, cavalry, and infantry divisions stood the Gondi Shohanshaw, who fought bravely in the dramatic multi-day confrontation. Steel met steel in this clash for the fate of the empire. Ultimately, the forces of the Caliphate proved victorious, with Arab sources claiming
historically,
that the
we all know that, yeah,
now defected to the invaders and converted to Islam.
There is true,
While
yeah.
the Sassanid Empire would go on to fall before the caliphs, the tribes of Daylam stubbornly resisted their invasion.
Yep.
In fact, they
most
would
of
go on
northern
to
Iran
proudly control their homeland for several centuries to come. Eventually, however, the Daylamites would once more begin offering their military services to their neighbors as mercenaries. So well recognized was their martial prowess that by the 10th century, Daylamite infantry would feature heavily in the army of the caliphs and, as had occurred with the prior Sassanids, it became customary for the Daylamites to serve as elite personal guards to their great kings.
When you're too good at your job, yeah.
Thus, we have witnessed half a millennia of history attesting to the vaunted status of the Daylamites. Without question, they were great warriors whose role as heavy infantry forces makes them all the more unique in a world otherwise dominated by archers and cavalry. Such a legacy should not be forgotten or overlooked.
Absolutely not, yeah.
As the proud martial status of these northern Iranians endures to this day.
In many shapes, actually.
We appreciated this exploration of the woefully underappreciated history of the Sassanids and their impressive military.
The most truthful thing that has been ever said in this video.
Next, and be sure to head over to our Patreon, where you can catch sneak peeks of upcoming content
to support them
and download the amazing art for each episode.
Oh,
a huge
the
thanks
artwork
to our
was
cast
actually
members
very
for
good.
supporting the channel, and a big shout out to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. We couldn't have done it without this team and this community. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related episodes. See you in the next one.
Oh, that was a really good one, actually. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, all of that. And if you like this video, maybe do the same for me. Now, in the afterthoughts of this video, I'm gonna mostly talk about this stuff that was talked about and maybe add some stuff that wasn't. Now, I kind of went over some of them, but to paint a picture or a timeline per se, you have to look at the Gilek and Daylamites and what were they known for, and technically when they were known for it. I would say I need to categorize it in 4 different groups: pre-Islam, during Islam, specifically after Islam, and then modern, because they also had a lot to do after Islam. Pre-Islam, these Daylamites, Gileks, and technically all the 5 families lived on south of the Caspian Sea, mostly known around Alborz, and a bit to the west of Iran. These people were autonomous since ancient times. As I said, they were pre-Iranian cultures that joined Persian ones along its way. Other kings than Sassanids did use them in their military. It was more of a diplomatic decision to have them as friends and not enemies. The terrain that they used to live off of is just one of the harshest you would ever see. Mixture of mountains and jungles and valleys, especially really good choke points that allowed these people to thrive in places that no horse could actually traverse. This type of heavy, fast, multifaceted infantry unit could prove immensely useful in this situation. So rather than just waging war with them, Persian kings usually allowed them a level of self-autonomy in exchange for levies, soldiers and conscripts, and of course tax money, as they would bend the knee to Shah and Shah, but they would retain their own claim of being a Shah. Shah itself means king, Shah and Shah mean king of kings or an emperor, so it wasn't bad to see a king serving other king. It was kind of the status quo, that was the way things moved. Now, during the wars with Islam, the Daylamites actually had some of the biggest, I would say, effects in this war, as of course they were kind of like against invaders or foreign adversaries. They fought against the Romans, the Muslim conquestors. Also, not all ethnicities or groups in Iran were okay or as big of an enemy you would think them to be to the Muslims. Some accepted them wholeheartedly, like with open arms. Khalas Muslims were one and the same. Others were not like that. Some fought to the bitter end. Some fought on the side of Zoroastrians, some fought on a religiousess state per se, the civil war. And while even during those wars, some did actually start working with the Rashidin Caliphate, them working with those people actually gave them their part of like autonomy, a legitimacy per se, as they did even keep their autonomous regions under their own rule, while at points they actively attacked even the Muslims that had them surrounded almost all the time. One or two of the empires that survived the Islamic conquest of Iran were both like from the Caucasus, and after Islam, after then, which this region was kind of renamed Tabaristan. As I said, they were mostly known by either the name Tabaristan or their religious names, which kind of became an ethno-religious group, the Ismailis. But the religion kind of took off after that, and well, it's a religion after this, so they incorporated all sorts of people in the religion and became less of an ethnic one and more inclusive. So yeah, after Islam they were given more names, but it's just the same people, just Muslim. During the Iranian intermezzo, which is like Iranian or Persian Renaissance, some of the first kings or dynasties to claim themselves Persians or try to revitalize this culture were from the same region. Some of the very more important characters in those rebellions against the Caliphate were from technically Daylamite and Gilak people. For that, you should look at the character named Mardavij. They also made their own country after a while, Al-Buyid or Buyid dynasty. They were the ones that picked up the mantle after Tabaristan and made it an official country, while mostly leaning towards Persia rather than their own oral traditions, even though they kept a lot of them. Also, a very big rabbit hole that I want to address at least is their involvement with the cult. It's the same one I referenced at the beginning. Now, there is no question that these people were really good at doing murdering, right? They were really good foot soldiers. Now, that thing got even worse when they got religious. After they became Muslim, some very prominent characters started taking notice, as they were kind of feared, and also a place that had its own autonomous region in the heart of an caliphate made it a very good playing ground for those that did not agree with the current status quo of the caliphate to use it as a base of operation. And what do you know, this is when a guy named Hassan al-Sabbah comes into play. Now, if you have heard this name, congratulations, you most likely paid some money to Ubisoft, but Hassan al-Sabbah is referred to as by Marco Polo as Old Man of the Mountain. And if that doesn't remind you of anything, he's the guy that created the Order of Assassins. He's the guy that coined the term assassins as the killer of a political party or a ruler. Now, how those two groups kind of meet? Well, Hassan al-Sabbah famously started its entire Order of Assassins officially after he got the castle of Alamut, or the Eagle's Nest, as it was referenced to in another game. You might have heard of it, Assassin's Creed. Before that, Alamut Castle was known as Kursiye Daylam, literally translated to Throne of Daylam. Daylam referring to the Daylamites, their kingdom and all that. So while Hassan Sabbah was trying to be its own religious leader, he was sending out a message that he was kind of taking up the mantle for the Daylamites in their own capital. And Daylamites were themselves isolationists and held very negative views of foreign invaders or those that wanted to subjugate them. So these beliefs kind of found a hotbed. I think the biggest castle that after Alamut was conquered was also Rud Khan Castle, which was also a Daylamite castle. So the history of these two groups was very much intertwined. And oh, they used it. Hasan Sabbah, after he took care of the Alamut castle in about, let me check, 1090 AD, also made the Nizari state, the Nizari schism of Ismailis, the religion, and even in their coins, in the state of Alamut or state of the Nizari people, in their coins, they even wrote down capital of Daylam, referring to the Alamut castle. So yeah, they were extremely involved in fighting against the emperors of even Persia, the Caliphate, during the Crusades even. Of course, during the Crusades would be under the Sinan's rule, not Sabbah's, but still. Almost all of the Hasan Sabbah's expansions was inside the Caspian Sea and north of Iran's geography, conveniently. So yeah, these people are known for a lot of things. If you want to know more in the modern time, there's a lot of their cultural language and descendants technically living inside and outside of Iran. As I said, Gilaki language and culture is technically their descendants. Gilaki and Daylamites were very close neighbors, technically referred to as the same people, but sadly their fall from fame came with their war with Karkia, which saw these two groups of people almost decimated. The survivors of these wars intertwined and made this one group, which was Gilak. Gilak and Daylam existed before, but Daylam kind of went away and Gilak's remained. This is also just one branch of them. The other branch would be people of Thought. Thought people culturally and linguistically are very close to Gilaks, but mostly live outside of Iran, a point where they differ from Gilaks. Now, mind you, Thought people also live in Iran. Thought people are divided mostly into two groups: Southern Thoughts, which are Iranian, living inside Iran, and the other one usually known as the Caucasus Thought, which are people that live mostly in Georgia, Azerbaijan, southern Dagestan, which is like south of Russia. Thought people also have like one of the less written down history, as they also kind of had this oral tradition going on, meaning their history would be repeated from parents to children, so this oral tradition would keep on going. So there is lots of their history that we do not know about. I ranted on enough. I hope you all enjoyed it. Very fascinating group of people, Persian Vikings that became problematic when they mixed up with a cult. Now you see why I said that. There's so much more I could talk about. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and see you all very soon. If you have a video you'd like me to see, comment it down below. See you next week.